I bought 31 pounds of smoked roast for the Sunday family potluck. That's 31 pounds that cost me $230 straight from my own wallet. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that my daughter-in-law Leora and her mother Maribel would show up empty-handed but armed with stacks of plastic containers, as if they were attending a complimentary buffet. And when I spotted my own son, Caden, packing up the grilled food for them to haul away, I uttered 3 words that ended the gathering forever. But let me start from the beginning, because this story has more layers than a cabbage, and every layer stings sharper than the last. It was a Friday morning when I decided to host this potluck. Our home in Seabrook, Oregon, has always been the family's anchor point. I'm 67 years old, and my lifelong goal has been to keep everyone knitted together. My husband Edwin always says I have a knack for turning a simple meal into a memorable festivity. Our kitchen is spacious, the backyard roomy enough for everyone, and my heart has always been wide open to anyone needing comfort food. That morning, I woke early as usual. I poured coffee for Edwin and me, and while he flipped through the local paper, I was already sketching out the menu. I settled on grilled sausages, melted manchego cheese, a crisp garden salad, roasted carrots, and of course, the centerpiece, 31 pounds of prime cuts, ribeye, spare ribs, skirt steak, and some marinated pork shoulder for those who preferred something less heavy. Edwin peered at me over his spectacles when I told him my plan. "Sweetheart, isn't that over the top?" "There will only be 8 of us," he chuckled, his grin putting me at ease. "Oh, Ed, you know I'd rather have more than run out. And if there's extra, folks can take some for the week," I replied, jotting notes in my worn notebook. I went to the coastal market around midday. The butcher, Mr. Alvarez, has known me nearly 25 years. When I told him I needed 31 pounds of meat for a family potluck, he gave a long whistle. "Mrs. Caldwell, this will be a feast no one forgets," he said, picking out the choicest cuts. "Just look at this ribeye, perfect marbling. And these ribs, aged to perfection." I paid the $230 without hesitation. Yes, it was a hefty sum, but to me there's no price tag on family unity. I've always believed a generous meal is the truest expression of love. Every dollar spent on that meat was an investment in laughter, harmony, and memories that endure. Back home, Edwin helped me stack the groceries neatly in the fridge. The meat dominated the shelves, but seeing it there, waiting to be cooked with care, filled me with pride. "Tomorrow will be flawless," I told him as we slid the last package into place. That afternoon, I called everyone to confirm. First, I rang my son, Caden. He's 34 now, a dedicated worker, though since marrying Leora 4 years ago, something about him feels altered. It's not that she's awful, but sometimes it seems he treads lightly to avoid upsetting her. "Mom, we'll definitely be there," he assured me. "Leora's excited. And her mom, Maribel, will come too." "Hope that's okay." "Okay?" "Of course. My door has always been open." Maribel is a 62-year-old widow who rents a small loft downtown. I thought it would be good for her to share the day with us. How foolish of me. I also phoned my nieces, Nadine and Sylvie, who never arrive without something homemade. They understand that family celebrations are shared efforts. Sunday dawned bright and breezy. The sky was clear, the air crisp, the kind of morning that promises a splendid day outdoors. I woke at 6:30 full of energy. I set the wide patio table with the teal cloth passed down from my grandmother. Out came the good china I reserve for special days. I chopped fresh tomatoes, scallions, and bell peppers for the salad. The sharp scent of onion filled the kitchen, mingling with the comforting aroma of coffee waiting for the guests. Edwin took command of the grill. He's always patient with the fire, saying the secret to an excellent potluck is steady embers and proper wood. I watched him arrange the logs with his usual precision while I tended to the roasted carrots, rinsed lettuce, and lined up the sides. At 10:45, Nadine and Sylvie showed up. As always, not empty-handed. Nadine brought a warm pear tart, its fragrance sweet and nostalgic, while Sylvie carried a fruit medley and a prized bottle of rose she had been saving. "Aunt Helen, it smells divine here," Nadine said, kissing my cheek. What can we do to pitch in? That's the difference. They came ready to help, arms full, hearts generous. I set them up slicing the manchego and cutting the bread. By then, Edwin had the sausages sizzling. Laughter filled the house. The aroma of meat drifted across the yard, and I felt in my element. This was my joy, family together, comfortable, glad to be here. But at 12:15, the mood shifted. The doorbell rang. It was Caden, his smile always softening me. But behind him were Leora and Maribel. And then I saw the first red flag. Leora was clad in an extravagant emerald dress, high heels clicking, makeup flawless, as though she were stepping into a gala, not a backyard potluck at her mother-in-law's. Most striking of all, she carried a large canvas tote, inside which I glimpsed neatly stacked plastic containers. Maribel, too, was overdressed in a cream suit, oversized purse in hand, and from the clattering sound, she also had containers tucked inside. "Hi, Helen," Leora cooed with that sugary tone she uses around others. She brushed my cheek with a kiss that never touched skin. "Your home is so charming. It smells delicious." Maribel followed with a polite smile that never touched her eyes. "Helen, thank you for having me in your lovely house." I waited. For wine, dessert, even a pack of store-bought cookies. Nothing. They stashed their bags in a corner and strolled straight to the patio like VIPs at an exclusive bistro. "Didn't you bring anything?" I asked, forcing my smile to stay put. "Oh, Helen, we were running behind," Leora replied with a nervous little laugh. "Besides, your cooking is always so exceptional that whatever we brought would have seemed small next to it." It was flattery dressed as an excuse, but I wasn't naive. At 67 years old, I can spot when someone tries to disguise thoughtlessness as a compliment. My poor son, Caden, shifted uncomfortably. I know him as well as I know my own hands, and I could see in his eyes that he sensed something was wrong, yet he said nothing. He never does when it means crossing his wife, even if it's the decent thing to do. "Well, don't you worry," I said, "because that's who I am. I always try to make people feel at ease, even when my insides are boiling. The important part," I told myself, "is that they came." We stepped out to the patio where Edwin already had sausages smoking on the grill. Nadine and Sylvie welcomed Caden warmly, though I noticed they were noticeably cooler with Leora and Maribel. They, too, had sensed the imbalance. "How marvelous!" Maribel exclaimed at the sight of the grill. "So much food. This could be a restaurant." "Helen bought 31 pounds, Edwin said proudly, unaware of the effect his words would have. I saw the way Leora's and Maribel's eyes lit up. Not with admiration, but with calculation. 31 pounds meant ample leftovers, and they had their containers ready to snatch up as much as they could. 31 pounds, my word, Leora said. No wonder we brought our containers. Helen is always so generous. There it was, the confession. The containers weren't an accident. They had come with a plan, contribute nothing, yet leave with enough food to last days. What followed was worse. They settled into their chairs like royalty waiting to be served. They didn't even ask how they could help. While Nadine and Sylvie bustled around with me, carrying plates, pouring drinks, laying the table, Leora and Maribel sat gossiping, scrolling on their phones, tossing out remarks about everything in sight. "Oh, your garden is charming," Maribel said, pointing at my flower beds. "Though those blossoms look a little tired. Perhaps they need more watering?" "More water?" My flowers were thriving. I tend them daily with care, like children. But of course, she had to find something to criticize, some way to feel superior. And Leora wasn't far behind. "This tablecloth is lovely, Helen, but don't you think it's a bit faded? Are you planning to get a new one soon?" My grandmother's teal tablecloth. The cloth I used at Caden's wedding, at countless birthdays, at every family milestone. A thread of family tradition and love. And here she was dismissing it like a worn rag. Edwin, thankfully, didn't hear any of this. His focus was the grill. But I heard every barb, every sly remark, every little dagger aimed at my home, my effort, my food. When Edwin announced the sausages were ready, Leora and Maribel were the first to rise, not to help serve, but to pile their plates. They took the choicest pieces, heaped generous portions, and once seated, began their critiques. "The sausage is tasty," Maribel said. "Though it could have used a bit more salt." "More salt?" "Edwin has been grilling for over 30 years. He knows the perfect touch." "But no," she had to jab. Leora chimed in next. "The salad is fresh, Helen. Though personally, I would have used less vinegar. But everyone has their own style." "My garden salad. The same recipe passed from my grandmother to my mother, then to me. The salad Caden devoured as a boy. Now, suddenly, it was too vinegary." But what stung most was Caden. My own son nodded along, agreeing silently, as though everything I had poured love into was flawed. When Edwin unveiled the main cuts, the situation worsened. The ribeye was glistening, tender inside, seared perfectly outside. The spare ribs melted from the bone. The skirt steak had the exact texture that comes only with skill and patience. Yet still they found fault. "What a pity the ribeye is a little overdone," Leora said, serving herself the thickest slice. "Overdone?" It was perfection. Anyone who knew even a little about grilling would have recognized it. But she needed to assert her superiority. Maribel wasn't to be outdone. "At home, I always rub the meat with lemon before grilling. Gives it a special tang. Maybe you could try it next time." Next time. She was already planning her return, another free meal, another chance to criticize. Her audacity knew no bounds. And then came the part that made my stomach churn. Between bites, and they ate heartily, for all their complaints, they started snapping photos of the food. "This is perfect for my Instagram," Leora said, posing with her fork raised. "My friends will be so jealous." She took photo after photo, fussing with angles and light, making sure the table looked abundant. Then she started typing furiously. "What are you writing?" Caden asked. "A post about this amazing family potluck," she answered, without glancing up. "All right, perfect Sunday with the best meal in town. Nothing beats a homemade feast." Homemade feast? She hadn't lifted a finger. She hadn't spent a cent. Yet here she was, claiming my effort as her own. Maribel followed suit, phone in hand. "I'll tag all my friends," she said with a sly grin. "They'll think I belong to such a generous family." Generous? Yes, we are. But generosity is different from being treated like fools. Nadine and Sylvie exchanged silent looks of disbelief, too polite to comment. I held my tongue too, though inside I felt like swallowing shards of glass. When the second helpings were gone, they leaned back, patting their stomachs. "There's far too much food," Leora said. "No way we'll finish." "It'd be tragic to waste all this meat," Maribel added with a feigned sigh. And then the true purpose of those containers emerged. Out came boxes of every size, large ones for meat, medium for salads, tiny ones for sauces. "We'll just take a little for the week," Leora said, unpacking her arsenal. A little? They had enough to haul away half the spread. Worst of all, Caden, my own flesh and blood, stood up and began helping them pack, without asking me, without considering that maybe I wanted to save some of what had cost me $230. "Mom always makes too much," he said lightly. "Better you take it than let it spoil." That was the breaking point. Watching my son gather the ribeye I had paid for, the tender ribs, even the manchego Nadine had carefully arranged, all being tucked away by two women who had brought nothing but criticism and containers. They filled box after box as if shopping on my dime. Edwin looked at me from the grill, eyes dark with anger, but just as helpless. Nadine and Sylvie were frozen, stunned at the audacity. When Caden sealed the last lid and handed it proudly to Leora, something inside me snapped. 67 years of patience, of tolerance, of being the mother-in-law who forgives, the mother who swallows her pride. But that day, seeing my son give away my devotion as if it were his to distribute, I couldn't endure another second. I rose slowly from my chair. The yard hushed to silence. Every gaze turned toward me. And in that stillness, with a calm I didn't know I had, I stood tall. Every eye locked on me, forks frozen halfway, laughter long gone, even the sizzling of the grill seemed to hush as if the fire itself sensed what was about to erupt. "Put it back," I said, my voice even and deliberate, slicing through the heavy silence. Caden blinked, confused, holding one of the containers midway between the table and Leora's tote bag. "Mom?" he whispered, as if he hadn't heard me right. I said put it back, I repeated, louder this time, every syllable weighted with 67 years of swallowed insults and forced smiles. Leora let out a strained laugh, clearly unsettled but trying to mask it. "Helen, don't be dramatic. There's too much food, and we're just trying to make sure it doesn't go to waste." Maribel added in her syrupy tone, "Yes, dear, think of it as us helping you. You won't have to store all this, and it will bring us meals for days. We're family, after all." I took a step closer, and my hand trembled, not with fear but with a rage so controlled it frightened even me. Family contributes. Family respects. Family doesn't show up empty-handed with boxes to raid what others worked for. The words shot out sharper than knives, and for the first time, Leora's smile faltered. She shifted uncomfortably in her expensive emerald dress, glancing at Caden as though expecting him to defend her. My son, my flesh and blood, the boy I raised with bedtime stories and warm meals, looked at me like a stranger caught between two worlds. "Mom, it's not that serious," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "It is serious," I snapped, my voice trembling under the weight of years I had kept silent. "I poured $230 into this meal. I roasted, I chopped, I planned. Edwin has been manning that grill since dawn. Nadine baked that tart from scratch, Sylvie opened her prized rose, and all you two brought were empty stomachs and containers." Maribel leaned back with that smug look, as though I were a foolish child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, Helen," she sighed. "You make it sound like a crime to take leftovers. We are only doing what everyone wants but won't admit." Nadine gasped softly, Sylvie shook her head in disbelief, and Edwin's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "No," I said firmly. "You came prepared. That's not taking leftovers, that's looting." Leora's voice grew shrill, panic creeping into her carefully polished exterior. "Looting? Really? Do you hear yourself? You're embarrassing everyone." "No," I said again, my tone steadier than ever. "You've embarrassed yourselves. Dressing like you're at a gala, criticizing every bite, every decoration, sneering at my grandmother's tablecloth, then photographing my food to pass off as your own online. And now? Now you want to strip my home bare." The silence afterward was suffocating, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the Seabrook breeze. Finally, Caden lowered his eyes and set the container back on the table, his cheeks red. But then Leora snapped, grabbing it back from him. "Don't you dare put that down. She always acts like the martyr, and we're supposed to grovel because she cooked dinner? It's food, Caden, food. If she really loved us, she'd be happy to share." My vision blurred with anger, and for a moment, I thought I might scream, but instead I felt something deeper rise within me, not rage, not hurt, but clarity. "Get out," I said simply. Maribel blinked, startled. "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my home. Leave your containers. Leave the food. And leave now." Caden's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked from me to Leora, to Edwin, then back at me, but I held his gaze with a steel he had never seen before. Leora scoffed, shoving her chair back so hard it scraped the patio. "Fine. We don't need this circus. Come on, Caden." She grabbed her tote, but I stepped forward, my hand on the bag. "The containers stay." Her painted lips twisted into a snarl, and for the first time, the polished facade cracked to reveal the selfishness beneath. "Unbelievable," she hissed. You'll regret this. Maribel stood slowly, adjusting her cream suit with exaggerated grace. Well, Helen, I suppose not everyone has the generosity they claim. Don't worry, Leora, we'll eat elsewhere. Clearly, we're not welcome. Nadine muttered under her breath, finally, she gets it. But the tension was suffocating as they made their way to the door. Caden hesitated, torn in half, his face pale. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. Caden, I said, softer now, my anger replaced with exhaustion. I have always loved you. Always. But love isn't blind. And I won't let you stand by while they disrespect me, your father, and this family. You choose where you stand. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and I saw tears forming in his eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. Come on. Leora barked, yanking his arm, her sharp nails digging into him. For a long, aching moment, time stood still. Then he shook her off, stepping back toward me. No, he said, his voice low but firm. I can't keep pretending this is okay. Leora's eyes widened, rage flashing in her gaze. You ungrateful, but before she could finish, Caden raised his hand, not to strike but to silence. Enough. Mom's right. This isn't family. This is taking advantage. For once, Maribel was speechless, her lips pressed thin. Leora looked betrayed, her eyes darting between us, realizing she was losing her grip. You'll regret this, Caden, she spat. If you walk away from me now, don't expect me to come crawling back. My son stood taller, straighter, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy I raised, the man I hoped he would become. Then leave, he said quietly. Because I won't let you humiliate my mother another day. And with that, the emerald-clad Leora and the icy Maribel stormed off, heels clicking angrily against the pavement, their words carried away by the sea breeze. The yard was silent, stunned, but I finally breathed deeply, the tightness in my chest easing. Edwin slipped his arm around my shoulder, Nadine and Sylvie exhaled in relief, and Caden stood there, tears streaming down his face, whispering, I'm sorry, Mom. I should have seen it sooner. For the first time that day, I smiled. You see it now, I told him, pulling him into an embrace. And as the sun dipped lower over Seabrook, casting golden light over the teal tablecloth and half-empty plates, I knew the potluck hadn't been ruined after all. It had revealed the truth, torn away the poison, and left only what mattered, family that stood together. The moment Leora and Maribel's heels disappeared beyond the gate, the air seemed to shift, as if the house itself sighed in relief, the weight of their presence lifted from the patio like storm clouds breaking after a long thunder. Silence lingered for a heartbeat, everyone frozen, the scent of grilled ribeye and charred sausages still heavy in the air. Then suddenly Nadine let out a laugh, not one of amusement, but of sheer disbelief, sharp and almost hysterical. Well, she said, her voice trembling, that was the most dramatic potluck I've ever been to. Sylvie put down her wine glass with a clink, shaking her head, her cheeks flushed with the wine and the tension. I thought they were going to strip the fridge bare next. Helen, I swear, if you hadn't said something, we'd be eating scraps for dinner tonight. Edwin finally spoke, his arm still protectively draped around my shoulders, his voice low but edged with pride. She did more than say something. She drew a line. And about time, too. Caden stood a few steps away, his head bowed, his hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles were white. I could see the storm inside him, shame and grief battling in his chest, and I knew he needed me to break the silence between us. Caden, I said softly, look at me. His eyes lifted slowly, rimmed red, and for a moment I saw not the grown man, but the boy who once scraped his knees and came running to me for comfort. I don't know what I was thinking, he whispered, his voice cracking. I let her turn me into someone I'm not. I let her pull me away from you, from all of this. He gestured to the table, the teal cloth, the wine, the tart, the laughter that had been stolen but was slowly returning. I betrayed you. I crossed the space between us and took his face in my hands. You lost your way, I told him, my own tears spilling over. But you found it again. And that's what matters. He broke then, folding into my arms like he hadn't done in years, sobs shaking his body as I held him close. Nadine and Sylvie turned away politely, giving him his dignity, and Edwin squeezed my hand, silent but proud. When Caden finally pulled back, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve, he looked at everyone gathered, his voice firm now. I don't want to lose this again. I don't want to spend another Sunday making excuses for people who only take. I want to be here, with you. His words settled over the group like a vow, and for the first time in years, I felt hope blossom in my chest instead of worry. Then sit down, I said with a smile, my voice lighter now. We still have plenty of food, and this time it's staying right here. Laughter rippled through the group, nervous at first but soon genuine, washing away the tension that had hung like fog. Edwin returned to the grill, flipping the skirt steak with renewed vigor, and Nadine sliced her pear tart while Sylvie poured the rose, the cork popping in celebration of something more than wine. It was a toast to survival, to standing tall. The plates filled again, not with greed, but with sharing, with passing bowls and pouring drinks, with toasts raised to resilience. As we ate, stories began to flow, childhood memories resurfaced, even jokes about the absurdity of the day. I still can't believe she actually said your flowers needed more water, Sylvie said, rolling her eyes. Maribel wouldn't know a garden if it sprouted in her living room. Laughter bubbled again, and this time it wasn't strained. Caden even joined in, though the sadness lingered in his eyes, a shadow of the choices he had made. I caught his hand under the table and gave it a squeeze. We'll heal, I whispered, and he nodded, squeezing back. By the time the sun began to set over Seabrook, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and pink, the table was a mess of empty dishes and half-drunk glasses, crumbs scattered across the teal cloth that had endured yet another family milestone. I rose and lifted my glass, the last of the rose glowing in the golden light. To family, I said simply. The kind that stands beside you, not against you. The chorus of voices echoed mine, glasses clinking, and for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Later, when the night grew cool and the others drifted inside to help with dishes and pack away the leftovers, the right way, with care and permission, Caden lingered beside me under the fading stars. Mom, he said hesitantly, I don't know what comes next. I don't know if Leora will forgive me for standing up to her. I don't know if she'll stay, or if she'll leave for good. I looked at him, my son, grown but fragile, and I knew the truth he feared to say aloud. If she loved you, really loved you, I said gently, she would never have asked you to betray your family. She would never have needed you to choose between respect and loyalty. If she leaves, then she was never yours to keep. His shoulders sagged, relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes, and he nodded slowly. Maybe you're right, he whispered. I touched his cheek. I know I am. When we finally went back inside, the kitchen was warm with chatter and clattering dishes, Nadine laughing with Sylvie over some joke, Edwin humming as he dried plates. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again, not like a stage for criticism or manipulation, but like a home filled with love. As the night wound down and everyone left, hugs exchanged, promises made to meet again soon, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen, looking at the fridge still filled with the remains of our feast. The containers Leora had brought sat untouched in a corner where she had abandoned them in her haste, and I smiled as I gathered them up. Not today, I whispered, placing them in a box to be donated to the local shelter. If anyone deserved that food, it was those who asked for nothing in return. When I finally slipped into bed beside Edwin, he kissed my forehead and murmured, "You were magnificent today, Helen." I chuckled softly. No, Edwin. I was just done being quiet. He held me close, and as I drifted off, I felt lighter than I had in decades, the burden of silence finally lifted. And though the potluck had begun in tension and nearly ended in ruin, it had given me something priceless, the strength to reclaim my voice, the courage to demand respect, and the gift of a son who had finally remembered where he belonged.